Welcome to DMG Scale Models. I'm Dan. We're going to try something a little different today. Went to Hobby Lobby recently, picked up this nice little 32nd scale 69 Corvette Stingray. Now this is basically a curbside kit, very simplistic. I purchased that to try out some new products from Hobby Lobby, their Airbrush line of paint. They come with gray primer, black primer. I have the thinner, the clear coat, and this is the color we'll be using for this Corvette. I'm going to use my trusty gallery airbrush to apply these products to this model. Stay tuned. As I mentioned before, this is a 1/32 scale kit, basically curbside, and level 3. You know, if somebody can explain to me Revell's level system, here's what's in our box. Yes, kids, that's it. That's your chassis, interior tub, few interior pieces, your wheels, and, well, for lack of a better term, chrome. The body, nicely detailed. Probably going to need a little cleaning up. I'm not taking the windshield out of the plastic because I just am not. Safer for the plastic. And then Revell's usual attaching 4 rubber tires to more plastic than it's needed. But we're going to start with the preparation of this kit, and then we're going to test out our new airbrush paints. Yes, it's parts cleaning time. Here I'm going to place some water in the sink, and I'm going to drop a few drops of Dawn dishwashing liquid. You can use whatever you like to use. I'm no product sponsor. This is purely for demonstrational purposes. Once you get a little water and soap in there, just kind of take the parts, put them in the water. That should be sufficient. We'll give those a moment. All right, so we have the parts in the water. Using a soft scrub brush, give them a good going over. This will clean off all the mold residue and oils from the parts, make them accept paint better. Once you've done that, you can then rinse the parts and place in your dish drainer to dry. These are basically the airbrush paints that'll be replacing either your Createx or your Vallejo model air paints. They're inexpensive at $1.99 a bottle. They're also sold in 8-pack sets for $7.99. I prepped the body for primer by removing all flashing with sandpaper and sanding sticks, using my X-Acto knife turned inverted to etch out the panel lines, knocked down some of the mold lines, and finished it off with 1000 grit sandpaper. Then I attached it onto this stand, and now it's ready for primer. Doing some preliminary tests with the primers, I sprayed 2 plastic spoons, one with gray primer and one with the black primer. I also then sprayed our top coat of orange onto it, 2 coats each. This is the gray primer with the top coat of orange. And this is with the orange paint over the black primer. I think that I'm going to stick with using the gray primer to paint the vehicle so the top coat can be more vibrant. So, to prepare the primer for use, we're going to mix it according to the ratios that they recommend, which is a 3-to-1 mixture, 3 parts paint, 1 part thinner. You're going to want to shake the paint up. Now, I'm going to take the cap off. And just to keep the ratios right, I'm going to use a 3mm pipette. We're going to put 3mm in this cup. Set that aside. Then we're going to take another pipette and put 1mm of the thinner. Probably should shake this a little too. That should be plenty for what we need to use it for. We'll mix it up. And there. Thin enough to use. Now let's take this over to the booth and continue with our project. I am using my gallery airbrush set at 20 psi to apply the primer. 2 light coats are applied 15 minutes apart to allow the primer to level. So here we are, about a half hour out of the booth, with 2 fresh coats. I'd say that it leveled really nice. The 3-to-1 mixture seems to be ideal. We'll let this dry a few days and see if we need to wet sand. I also used the black primer for the rest of the parts. To be really honest, this stuff laid out pretty smooth. I really don't think it needs to be wet sanded, but this is a test of this paint and its primers. So I'm going to wet sand it with some 5000 grit sandpaper, and we'll see how that does. So I have a few pieces of 5000 grit sandpaper. Dip the sandpaper in the water, shake that off, and we're going to try right here by the door. So a little bit of light sanding. Let the sandpaper do the work. Body a little bit. Try to stay away from your mold lines as much as possible. And like I said, let the sandpaper do the work. Stuff seems to be holding up really well. Let's try that. It seems to sand pretty well. Nice and smooth. Well, I've completed the wet sanding, and to be honest with you, it held up really well. Although I did use 5,000 grit sandpaper, I did manage to hit one little spot here where I burned through the primer, but that's on the wheel well trim. That's not a big deal. But I think overall, it handled wet sanding rather well. All right, so now I'm going to mix the top coat. We're going to follow the manufacturer's recommended 3 parts paint to 1 part thinner right here. I'm going to draw up 3 milliliters of paint. Put the cap back on there so we don't have any accidents. And 1 part thinner. Mix that up. And we'll be applying it to our body. Once again, I will use my gallery airbrush set at about 21 psi to apply the orange color. Several coats will be applied, allowing 15 minutes between coats. While the paint cured, I did some detailing to the chassis and the interior. On the chassis, I used bare metal foil for the exhaust, painted the frame with gloss black, and the axle and drive shaft I painted with Tamiya's metallic gray. The engine bottom, I used the same orange color that I used for the body to paint the engine and transmission. I then used the chrome refill through an airbrush, and I sprayed the wire rims. I applied the hubcap decals as well as the white stripe decals for the tires. For the interior, I detailed the interior with the decals, and I wood grained the steering wheel, assembled it, and once the body is cleared, we'll be ready for assembly. I applied the decals for the body once the paint dried. You have the side gills, the stingray for the side, the gas tank, the vent grills, more gills, and the Corvette logo and taillights on the back. We'll let those set real good, and then we'll put our clear coat. I'm using the same 3-to-1 mixture for the clear coat. I will be applying this with my gallery airbrush. I applied several light coats, waiting 15 minutes between coats to build up the sheen. I had to add a little more thinner for better flow and to prevent tip dry. I will let this cure for several days before polishing. And here we are several days after applying the clear coat. It does offer a nice shine, but because the mixing ratio and me thinning it more as applying it, it did come out a little rough. We're going to try correcting this with some wet sanding and some polishing. Well, here we are after wet sanding, buffing, and polishing. I got a pretty nice sheen out of it, despite the fact that the first coat that I applied, I went by the 3-to-1 ratio, and it came out kind of thick and goopy. So I let it dry, sanded it as best as I could, and then I put 2 more coats after I thinned it down 1-to-1. Still a little rough in some areas, but it went down better with that mixture. Overall, it doesn't look too bad, but I'll be honest, there are better acrylic varnishes out there to use for models. Well, now that that's done, we can put the rest of the car together. I put the glass into the body, then pressed the interior onto the mounting tabs. I assembled the wheels and placed them onto the chassis, then placed the chassis into the body. I finished the assembly by pressing in the front and rear bumpers. Here's the completed assembly of the 1/32 scale Revell 69 Corvette Stingray. My overall take on Hobby Lobby's airbrush paint is that it's easy to use, low to no odor, and an affordable option for budget-conscious modelers. The primers performed well, and the paint levels pretty nicely using their 3-to-1 ratio. As for the clear varnish, perhaps using a different ratio of thinner to paint and a lighter application of coats might have earned me better results. As I mentioned, there are different options for acrylic clear coats, such as Kaleidos varnishes or Createx. I did take my test spoons and use Krylon Crystal Clear acrylic spray, as well as the Tamiya TS13 spray, and those did not wrinkle the paint samples, so I believe the paint could even hold up to 2K clear. Overall, I would recommend this product. This build will complement my other small-scale builds nicely. Well, this concludes our test of Hobby Lobby's airbrush paints. I hope you found the information in this video helpful and useful. Thanks for watching.